there's some major SCOTUS rulings. One of them has the potential to have impacts on cities up and down the West Coast that are really struggling with the homeless crisis. And that is the decision in the Grants Pass case. So the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that no, it is not cruel and unusual punishment to have bans on public camping. The question is, how will elected leaders who have allowed the homelessness crisis in Washington, Oregon, and California, how will they use this ruling to actually help deal with the homelessness crisis? This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. So again, Supreme Court of the United States, City of Grants Pass, Oregon, v. Johnson. And this had to do, again, with this lower court ruling that you can't just say you can't be homeless and set up a tent here in a public space because that's cruel and unusual punishment. Now, had SCOTUS ruled in line with that, that would have been disastrous. I mean, you take our homelessness crisis times 1,000 because it would have stripped cities of the ability to clear anyone from public spaces, whether they were offered access to services or not. But thankfully, SCOTUS fell on the right side of this. They held the enforcement of generally applicable laws regulating camping on public property does not constitute, quote, cruel and unusual punishment prohibited by the Eighth Amendment. Okay, so what's going to happen now? The answer is it depends. The answer is it depends on the city you live in. It depends on the political will of the person in charge of the city that you live in and whether they're willing to take this and then take a more aggressive stance on public camping. Now, I happen to believe there's already been a slow, gradual shift on this issue, even in very progressive places like San Francisco, like Portland. I mean, remember, we talked on the show last week about how Mayor Ted Wheeler in Portland came out and he said, you know what? We have to have, for a civil society, we have to have rules and people have to play by the rules. So he said last week that starting today, they're starting to enforce their ban on camping, even in the city of Portland. And we've had elected leaders across cities in Washington state who have said, look, this is out of control. We're going to enforce our camping ban. We're going to continue to offer services and outreach. But if they don't take it, then we're going to tell them they can't camp here. So that has been the case, and I think that's entirely appropriate. I don't really want necessarily any elected leaders to use this Supreme Court ruling and say, hey, just go out and clear them, spray them down and clear them out. I want them to offer services first. That's important because moving them from place to place doesn't solve the crisis. Getting them help for their drug addiction, for their mental health issue, and for, in the rare case, when they truly just cannot afford a place to live, which I think is like 0.00001% of people who are living on our streets. I think that's appropriate. So I think that's what you'll continue to see in Washington state. But then there's the question of cities that have camping bans that for various reasons are not being enforced as we speak. How does this ruling from SCOTUS change that? So one of the cities where this is clearly an issue that's up for discussion is the city of Burien, Washington. So as you know, because we've discussed it on the show, the city of Burien has a ban on camping, and it specifically limits this. It has kind of a map where it says, okay, can't camp here, can camp here, can't camp here, can camp here. And then, we're going to go out, we're going to offer you services, and then we're going to clear those encampments if you don't take the services. The issue is that the King County Sheriff's Office is responsible for enforcing that ban. And the King County Sheriff, who's now an appointed leader, not an elected leader, has said, no, we're not going to enforce the city of Burien's ban on camping. We don't think it's constitutional, so we want a little more clarity on that. So that's the question. Okay, you said we're not enforcing it because it's not constitutional. Well, now the U.S. Supreme Court says, no, that's constitutional. It doesn't amount to cruel and unusual punishment. So what happens from here? Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling joins us to discuss. Mayor Schilling, welcome back to Undivided.
Thanks for having me back.
All right. It's a new day in Burien, right? Grants Pass is no more. Supreme Court says not cruel and unusual punishment. So the King County Sheriff's Office came in over the weekend and they've been working hand in hand with you to clear some homeless encampments, right?
You would think that would be the case because their constitutional question has been answered. And that was the whole point of their lawsuit in the first place, was to say, we're not sure if this is constitutional. Well, we've just gotten a Supreme Court opinion that says it is in fact constitutional. The city of Burien, our city attorney, our legal team knew it was constitutional the entire time. It was crafted within the framework of Martin versus Boise. And now we have this news that the sheriff's statement, the sheriff's public statement, is that they're still not going to enforce it, even if the district court judge says they have to, which is their lawsuit in the first place. So it's a bit of an interesting, confusing time right now.
Yeah, to say the least. I'll just read for folks the statement that we got from the King County Sheriff's Office. Friday's U.S. Supreme Court ruling does not change our current policy on enforcing the camping ban in Burien. We will not arrest based on the change in this law until other issues are addressed, such as an ordinance which includes prohibited camping locations and more precision on the conduct prohibited in designated no camping zones. As noted by the Supreme Court, quote, the Constitution provides many additional limits on state prosecutorial power, promising fair notice of the law. Our deputies are sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and we remain steadfast in our position that Burien's ordinance violates these rights. The King County Sheriff's Office and its deputies serving the Burien community will continue to enforce all other City of Burien laws. So your understanding today, what specifically do they believe is wrong, continues to be wrong with your ordinance?
Well, see, now I have no idea. Now I am beyond confused because King County Executive Dow Constantine himself came out on Friday and is quoted as praising the U.S. Supreme Court decision. So we have a situation where now the person who's suing us is saying what the Supreme Court decided is correct. And their statement also is confusing because nowhere in our ordinance do we arrest anybody, and we don't even have a fine associated with a civil citation. Unlike the city of SeaTac, where the King County Sheriff's Office is contracted to enforce their homeless camping law, and they have a $1,000 fine associated with theirs, but the Sheriff's Office continues to enforce the city of SeaTax. So there's some confusing elements here of a county agency determined to not fulfill the contract obligations they have for our city that we pay them to fulfill. And the public comments coming from the executive's office are the Supreme Court's decision is being praised by him. But certainly I'm confused in the sense that our ordinance does not criminalize, our ordinance does not arrest, our ordinance does not issue a fine. So I don't know what their issue is at this present moment, especially since the Supreme Court has determined that it is constitutional for cities to be able to say you are not allowed. You have to move your tent if the city has asked you to move your tent.
Yeah.
And
do you plan to have this conversation with King County? Because I'm also baffled. I mean, the statement we got is a little bit of word soup. You know, we're following up to try to get some clarity on what exactly the issue is. But as you said, there seems to be a lot of different messaging on this. So do you have a meeting scheduled? Are you trying to get a meeting with the sheriff's office or the county?
Well, there's a couple things going on at the same time here, too, on movement on this, because the King County Sheriff's Office still has their lawsuit live against us in the U.S. District Court. So the U.S. District Court judge still has to make a determination if that suit against us by the King County Sheriff's Office is within constitutional bounds or not.
But and that would now include, just really quick, I know we're not constitutional scholars, but that ruling would now have to take into consideration the Supreme Court ruling on Grants Pass, correct?
It'd have to.
Yeah.
It'd have to, because the U.S. Supreme Court just said that the Ninth Circuit's Martin versus Boise decision is out of line, and that it is constitutional for cities to be able to have time, manner, and place restrictions on public camping, just generally. Mm-hmm. And I should also mention that this isn't just the Supreme Court. Amicus briefs were written by the governor of California, the mayors of Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, and the president of the United States. So this is not like this is a broad coalition of government leaders that are saying we need the tools to be able to handle this. And so we have the U.S. District Court judge still needing to make his determination. So their lawsuit is still live. The King County Sheriff's lawsuit is still live. And the other thing we have going on at the same time is that the King County Sheriff's Oversight Committee, the group of cities that all contract with the Sheriff's Office, who do not have their own police force, but pay the Sheriff's Office to enforce the law, they have agreed to renegotiate the interlocal agreement with the Sheriff's Office. So we are now in a situation where the Sheriff's Office is saying they don't want to do their job, but the courts and the organizations that are holding the Sheriff's Office accountable are all saying, well, you have to. What is going on? So there's multiple avenues at place here to hold the sheriff's office and King County Executive accountable, and I think that's important.
I guess I don't get it. I'm deeply confused. Is there two things? Is there some sort of underlying beef, for lack of a better phrase, that we don't know about that would explain how hostile they're being about your camping ordinance?
I don't I don't explicitly know.
Okay.
I don't publicly know. I don't publicly know of any. But, last election cycle, the folks that ran on a platform of doing something about unregulated tent encampments won the election with close to 60% of the vote. And then we started governing and we put into place this ordinance, which was devised within a framework of Martin versus Boise, prioritizes getting people services, does not criminalize, does not issue a fine. And the King County Sheriff's Office had been enforcing that ordinance for 3 months. They had been doing it because they wrote it with us and they stopped. We don't know we don't know. There could be, not sure, haven't seen publicly, haven't heard publicly. So I can't go off of any speculation of who may or may not be personally holding a grudge or a vendetta against us for whatever reason. We're just Burien. We're a 54,000 person city, and we're just Burien. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they believe there's some fundamental differences in the way that your ordinance has been crafted versus other ordinances. And really quickly, just correct me if I'm wrong in interpreting it this way. Your ordinance specifically says no camping in these places ever, right?
Yeah. So there's an associated appendix to the ordinance. It's not within the ordinance, but there's a city manager's map where that's designated spots for camping. Yes.
And that seems like that's the issue.
They seem to be saying that's the issue.
Okay.
However, they worked with the city manager to draft that map. They were aware of the map. They discussed it with the city manager and the city attorney. So, and it's a map that's existed from the beginning of our ordinance crafting. So it's not like there was a shock to anybody when now all of a sudden the map seems to be a problem for them. But again, it's not a part of the ordinance. It's an appendix to the ordinance almost. And they seem to be saying there's an issue with it. I don't know what that issue is. They just say they have a problem with it.
Would there be an issue with just getting rid of the appendix and saying, okay, we're going to have an ordinance that's more in line, that doesn't have that appendix where it's have specific areas where you absolutely cannot camp at any time for any reason whatsoever, and just doing something that's more in line with what other cities are doing?
I mean, I think that our city council is open to having conversations around what we would need to do to improve or fix or have some sort of change to the ordinance. However, we don't know what those would be from the sheriff's office because the sheriff has not actually sat down through either their lawsuit or the bounds established within the interlocal agreement and the contract disputes. They haven't done that. They just are saying they don't want to enforce this law, and they haven't sat down within the processes in place to talk about this.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, people are dying. I don't get it. I don't get it. It seems like we have enough sort of case law and all of this to be able to move forward and just say, like you said, we're not saying go away, like we're going to put you in handcuffs. We're saying, hey, we've offered you shelter. You're not taking it. You can't camp here. I don't get the problem. I don't get the problem.
And meanwhile, we have expended millions of dollars into human services funding. We have a brand new outreach homeless outreach and nonprofit going on the ground for 3 years. We've expended money for 3 years to have this person operate. They're going to be on the ground. They're going to be getting folks connected to shelter and services. And, I've heard other leaders around the county say, we have what we have in certain cities. The services we have in certain cities are the services we have. But we expect everybody, regardless of who you are. I think it's an expectation now. Well, now it should have always been an expectation, but it's an expectation that no matter who you are, you live in a community. And when you live in a community, you sign a social contract that you're going to abide by the laws, and you're going to abide by that social contract whenever you're in that city, no matter who you are. And you follow those laws and you follow those rules in order to improve the city. And all we're trying to do is help people get into a better situation where they can get assistance with their drug addiction. They can get assistance with their mental health crisis. We can help find them housing, no matter what it is. But we need the panoply of tools, and I love that word because that was in the Supreme Court opinion. We need the panoply of tools that local governments have to get people off the streets into shelter and services. And the longer they have an option of not doing that, we're going to continue to see overdoses. And that's not a positive element of any community.
No, and I'll just end with this because the Portland mayor said it well, and I was looking for it. He echoed what you said there. He said they're starting to enforce their camping ban. He said the only way you can define fairness is you establish rules, you make clear what the rules are, and everybody plays by the same rules. And that's the only way you can have a civil society. So Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling, we'll follow what happens here. We'll reach back out to the sheriff's office to try to get some more clarity on what's happening, but we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a weird situation. The SCOTUS ruling clearly gives cities carte blanche to enforce camping bans. It says, no, it's not cruel and unusual punishment. And so for the King County Sheriff's Office to continue to stand by, well, we have questions about their ordinance. You know, we don't know about its constitutionality. Are you saying that you know more about what's constitutional than the Supreme Court of the United States? It's baffling to me. I failed to understand it. And if it is an issue with they are specifically concerned that the Burien ordinance has these little kind of camping no-go zones at all, like you can't even camp there for a couple days before they tell you to move, then can't they work something out to, again, the goal is you've got people dying in the Burien homeless encampments of overdoses that clearly aren't getting the help they need. It's not empathy in any stretch of the imagination to leave people living in squalor with needles in their arms and toes. So I don't understand what the sheriff's office thinks it's accomplishing by not at least enforcing this while whatever they're trying to do works its way. You know, they've got their own lawsuit going on. So you're making, in my opinion, which is my show, I don't know if I have to preface it with it's my opinion, they're making a conscious decision to let people die. That's the decision and the choice that the sheriff's office is making, which is deeply disappointing. I've reached out to the sheriff's office. They sent us their just generic statement they'd sent out to the rest of the media. And I followed up and I said, I guess I'm still confused. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, why you still, in light of the Grants Pass decision, why you still refuse to enforce the camping ordinance on the books in the city of Burien. So in a nutshell, the Grants Pass decision is good, but it is only going to make a difference if the people in power choose to use it to enforce the law. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org.